A fatal crash on a northwestern Ontario highway over the long weekend. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Northwest Region OPP have confirmed that a transport crash yesterday led to a fatality.
The single vehicle collision also forced the closure of Highway 17 between Ignace and the Sioux Lookout turnoff for around 6 hours. The crash occurred in Satterley Township shortly before 8:30 in the morning. Dryden OPP responded along with fire crews and paramedics. The passenger in the transport truck, a 24-year-old from Mississauga, was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver was transported to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The OPP's traffic incident and collision reconstruction teams are involved in the ongoing investigation. The highway reopened at around 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
The Thunder Bay Police Board learned more about the service's peer support team at today's monthly meeting.
The group helps officers and their families deal with the mental struggles that can come with working in law enforcement. Vasilios Bellos reports.
Getting police officers the medical or psychological help they need. At Tuesday's meeting, the Thunder Bay Police Board heard more about the 17-member peer support team, which assists officers and their families by connecting them to professional help.
What we're doing is working. The stigma is going away.
Service Wellness Coordinator Constable Jeff Elvish says this is often in relation to mental health challenges that come through the profession. Elvish says this is an important step forward, knowing it wasn't a conversation being had a few years ago.
There's 25 years of my career. I know it was kind of the, don't say anything, you're tough, you can handle this stuff. And it's not true. I'm trying to get the message out that it's okay to not be okay sometimes and to talk to somebody about it, because that's really important.
Since 2017 in Thunder Bay, 1 police officer, 1 police cadet, 2 paramedics, and a firefighter took their own lives. Many instances of mental health disorder in the profession stem from post-traumatic stress.
Good openings there where people come forward, so it's been really good.
Police Chief Darcy Fleury says the team has been beneficial to service members and recognizes senior leadership needs to play a role in the solution.
We just have to be present, right? I mean, we have to make sure people understand that at times when they may be having a bit of difficulty, that they have the support, that they feel like it's okay to come forward, that they're not going to be, sort of criticized or chastised or kind of put in a place where they don't feel like they're comfortable or feel like they're wanted to come to work.
In 2023, the peer support team was approached by members 464 times. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
A 27-year-old Brampton man faces a number of drug trafficking and weapons charges after he arrived in the city with about $78,000 worth of suspected cocaine and fentanyl, as well as a loaded handgun. During the course of their investigation, Thunder Bay Police discovered that he'd arrived on Saturday, and the accused was arrested that morning. The man faces 10 charges in all. Police will hold a media conference tomorrow morning to discuss this and other recent drug trafficking and weapons arrests.
Ganoogaming First Nation has declared a state of emergency due to rising crime. The community near Long Lac is calling on the federal and provincial governments for immediate assistance.
You have to say enough is enough, and we need to draw the line somewhere and get the support.
Ganoogaming Chief Sherry Taylor says crime in the First Nation has increased over the past year, and serious incidents recently pushed council to declare the state of emergency. She connects the issue to a lack of police presence in the community and is demanding that Ottawa and the province step up to increase the number of officers and provide support for local peacekeepers.
You know, when you have drugs coming into the community, you have a lot of crime that comes with that, and that's like theft, assaults, serious crimes that have been occurring, and it's affecting our children.
Taylor adds the drug and alcohol abuse in Ganoogaming stems from both historic traumas and recent tragic events in the community. They're also asking for resources to address mental health and addictions.
The Transportation Safety Board has wrapped up its investigation of a hard landing in Sandy Lake in the fall of 2022, which caused significant damage to the fuselage of the plane. This photo shows the damage to the bottom of the bearskin plane, which was carrying 28 passengers and 3 crew members at the time. Fortunately, there were no injuries, but the impact caused the interior structure of the plane to buckle. The TSB found the pilot and first officer had both been hired a few months earlier and had a limited experience flying in the remote north. The flight path showed an unstable approach, which then caused the plane to bounce and tip up on the landing. Since that, Perimeter Aviation has revised its stabilized approach criteria and added a training video on pitch awareness.
Thunder Bay's Realty Services Division has identified some city-owned land that can be put up for sale.
Staff have found 8 properties, most of which are parkettes, that they'll recommend to City Council to declare surplus. The goal is to make more land available to construct much-needed homes in the city. Jess Clement has the details.
The Realty Services Division has posted public notice signs on various city-owned properties, which they'll be recommending to City Council to be declared surplus. In total, 8 properties are being looked at, with 6 of them being parkettes in area neighborhoods, including this one on Holly Crescent. Realty Services Manager Deanna Walker says she understands not everyone may be in favor.
We certainly appreciate that there are impacts to this exercise. We do invite feedback from the community. Let us know what they think, what they feel about that. That was included. How to do that was included in the information that was sent out to the neighborhoods. We have identified these properties as being already on servicing. They exist in these neighborhoods. They're infill sites to support housing. So while we acknowledge that there are certainly impacts, we are doing this for a purpose.
Walker notes the aim is to utilize the surplus lands for building much-needed new homes. She says when looking into properties, their top criteria was land in neighborhoods with pre-existing infrastructure. Development Services Director Joel Deputer says they're looking into all different types of housing to be built on the properties, including multi-unit housing.
This is really important to meeting the housing goals and also to assist the city's financial situation to generate more taxes, more housing units on existing services. So when council directed administration to go find surplus properties, including parkland, that was a key criteria for staff when we reviewed our property inventory. So what lands are on existing services, which lands could be used for housing, and in the case of parkland, where is there alternative park space nearby?
All money raised through the potential sale of lands will be reinvested into improving city parks. Walker says they're looking for feedback from citizens via email or regular mail, and she adds that they hope to reply to everybody. Jessica Clement, TVT News.
The longtime former publisher of the Chronicle Journal has passed away. Colin Bruce died this morning at the age of 73. He began his newspaper career in Belleville before moving on to Cornwall, Sarnia, Kirkland Lake, and Orillia. He was named general manager and publisher of the Chronicle Journal in 1994 and spent 30 years in that position before retiring in 2014. Bruce also took on leadership roles with the United Way and Lakehead University. Funeral arrangements are still pending.
Staff at the Lakehead Region Conservation Authority have a new assignment this year, monitoring the status of the sea lamprey population in the Nebing and McIntyre rivers. For the first time, the organization has been contracted by the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans to trap and release the invasive fish species in the rivers over an 8-week period. 2 of the traps were placed in the Nebing River near Edward Street and are checked daily for the mark and recapture study. Since placing traps at the end of April, only 1 lamprey has been caught so far. Environmental planner Michelle Willows says the study helps them assess the population to determine how effective control measures are.
It's really important to protect our fisheries. Sea lamprey had a really detrimental effect in the past, and so the Great Lakes Fishery Commission actually started the sea lamprey control program to get a handle on these invasive species and to protect our native ones for the long term.
The traps will remain in the rivers until the end of June.
An orphaned moose calf from the Thunder Bay area is settling into its new home at a wildlife sanctuary in the Muskokas. The male calf, nicknamed Thunder, is believed to just be over about a week old. Few details are available about where exactly it was found or how it was separated from its mother. An employee with the Ministry of Natural Resources first brought it to a wildlife center in the Sudbury area for a few days. The little moose was then driven further south to the Aspen Valley Wildlife Sanctuary in Roseau near Parry Sound. Thunder is expected to spend the next year in rehab before being released back into the wilderness.
Good to hear that Thunder is being well taken care of.
Absolutely.
All right, let's turn our attention to the weather now, Haley, and it is a wet one out there right now.
Yes, Thunder was very amply named, that's for sure, because we are expecting to see some tonight, but today was very much the calm before the storm, quite literally, as we did have a high of 16 today. That happened at noon, but it didn't last for very long. We saw some pretty drastic drops after that hour. It was mostly cloudy for most of the day, with rain having already started. Most of you may have noticed on your commute home. But yes, there is more coming, and that's why we are going to draw our attention to some weather warnings. We have rainfall warnings across most of the region, and even if it's not a rainfall warning, there is most likely a rainfall special weather statement as well. And even our Lakehead Region Conservation Authority, they have put out a special flood watch statement for the entire region, including areas like Thunder Bay, Nebing, Oliver, Papoonge, Dorian, Shunya, O'Connor, and Comney. So any low-lying areas or areas like rivers and streams, you have to be extra careful around those areas within the next 24 hours, as flooding may occur. Be careful on roadways especially. You don't know what's lying underneath large puddles. And so the heavy rain is expected with strong winds beginning later this evening. And for certain areas, that could be around 50 to 70 millimeters over the course of a 24-hour period. And winds could gust anywhere from 30 kilometers to 70 kilometers in certain areas of the region. So let's take a look at our region. We can see our radar had quite the boom underneath us, so south of us, below the border, but that large low pressure system is now moving up. You could see at this hour, it has already entered our region. So it is coming in with a great size and a lot of force as well. So when we take a look at where we're at this hour, Fort Frances, Atikokan, and Dryden, they're all at 14 right now, and they all are already seeing rain as well. And then Kenora, Red Lake, Sioux Lookout, they haven't seen rain yet, but they are looking mostly cloudy. 19 in Red Lake, though. We even have some warmer areas like Armstrong, they're at 20. And they saw a high of 22, but they are seeing some light rain right now. Greenstone is overcast and at 22. And yes, so right now there's a few areas that are still not seeing rain yet, but almost everywhere tonight will be. Over in Sault Ste. Marie, though, they're under partly cloudy skies, and they're at 24 degrees right now. So they are definitely not getting anything too wet and wild yet. But for tonight in Thunder Bay, rain will be heavy at times, like I mentioned, with the risk of thunderstorms. We're looking at getting about 30 to 40 millimeters tonight, but that will continue into tomorrow as well. And our wind situation will be a little interesting. Our low is 10 degrees, but winds could fluctuate anywhere from 20 to 50 kilometers an hour, and they're going to shift a little bit as the night goes on, Ryan and Riley. They're going to move from the east, southeast to northeast as the night goes on, and that's where we're going to see gust changes. So I'll have more details after.
All right, well, you know what, Haley? I was thinking about watering my plants today, and I'm very happy I chose not to. Thank you. Mother Nature will do that for us. Thank you so much. Well, when we come back, Canada's inflation has cooled to a 3-year low at 2.7%. And when we come back, we'll figure out what that could mean for the Bank of Canada's key interest rate.
Certainly moves the needle perhaps in favor of a June rate cut.
Canada's inflation rate has fallen to the lowest level in 3 years. Inflation cooled to 2.7% in April. That's lower than the Bank of Canada's forecast.
The big question now, of course, is whether that's enough to prompt the Bank of Canada to cut its key interest rate next month. CTV's Tony Grace reports.
4 months now of cooling inflation numbers, cranking up the possibility for an interest rate cut this summer, although the timing of it is still the big question. Digging deeper into the numbers, food prices, a big factor in slowing inflation. They were still way higher than they were a few years ago, but just 1.4% higher than 1 year ago. On the other hand, gas prices kept the rate up. They were 6% higher in April compared to a year earlier. The overall rate, though, is a stronger signal the Bank of Canada could make its first interest rate cut in a long time on one of its next 2 decision dates, June the 5th or July 24th.
It's a close call. They might wait an extra month and move in July, but this report certainly moves the needle perhaps in favor of a June rate cut.
I'm suspecting that they'll hold, even though we're overdue for a cut.
Overdue in the minds of many Canadians with variable rate mortgages and car loans, among other things.
Every quarter of a percent that we can cut is going to help those people hold on to their homes, and not just that, maintain some disposable income to be able to continue contributing to the economy.
The Conservatives have been criticizing the Trudeau government over inflation, the cost of living, and the carbon tax, doing so again today in the House of Commons.
They're patting themselves on the back when they realize that Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves.
But the Deputy Prime Minister argued her government's financial planning last fall and in this spring's budget have created the conditions for lower inflation.
Thanks to our fiscally responsible economic plan, inflation is at a 3-year low. That's right. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada for 4 months in a row. That's good news for Canada and Canadians. That's right.
Many Canadians, though, are waiting for that move on interest rates from the Bank of Canada. The verdict should come in either 2 weeks or 9 weeks.
And that was CTV's Tony Grace reporting. Developing news today about one of Canada's most notorious serial killers. Corrections Canada has confirmed that Robert Pickton has been seriously injured in what's being called a major assault in a Quebec prison. CTV's John Woodward brings us the details.
That's Robert Pickton admitting to an undercover officer in 2002 that he was one shy of 50 murders of vulnerable women in Vancouver's downtown east side. Many Indigenous, many drug users, so many Pickton doesn't appear to recognize the photos of them in a police interview.
I don't know. There's so many people coming out of my face, I don't know.
Pickton faced 27 first-degree murder charges. The Crown proceeded on 6. The evidence produced after an extensive search of his family's ramshackle farm in the Vancouver suburb of Port Coquitlam. His sentence, life in prison, most recently in Quebec's maximum security Port Cartier institution. On Tuesday, the Correctional Service of Canada said, "We can confirm that inmate Robert Pickton was involved in a major assault on May 19th. This assault did not involve any of our staff. The safety and security of institutions is paramount, and an investigation into what occurred is currently underway." Police in Quebec saying the 74-year-old Pickton is clinging to life in hospital. The suspect, a 51-year-old man who is still incarcerated.
Another inmate who had a history of assaulting people, had been in segregation for a while and had been released onto this specialized unit, and that he attacked Mr. Pickton.
Pickton was convicted in the death of Marnie Frey.
It's not a big, oh, thank God. There's so many more questions that have to be answered.
In telephone interviews from prison, Pickton hinted at a much wider story.
If I got on a stand or something, I could blow the whole thing apart.
But he chose not to take the stand. An inquiry into the case showed how few protections there were for his vulnerable victims, as well as some police mistakes that let him kill for longer. Pickton penned a book which briefly sold on Amazon. That prompted BC to enact a law against offenders profiting from their crimes. Frey says his lawyer told him the attack left Pickton brain dead, a sign his life sentence may be close to an end. John Woodward, CTV News.
A man is dead and dozens more injured after a Singapore Airlines flight hit turbulence early this morning. The plane plunged thousands of feet, forcing pilots to make an emergency landing. CTV's Heather Wright has the details.
First responders carry injured passengers off a Singapore Airlines flight as ambulances take them to hospital. More than 70 people were hurt after the plane, traveling from London to Singapore, hit severe turbulence. A man in his 70s was killed. One passenger says anyone not wearing a seatbelt was launched immediately, including the cabin crew.
Every single cabin crew person I saw was injured in some way or another, maybe with a pressure on their head.
The force so strong people's heads dented the overhead bins, oxygen masks left dangling from the ceiling.
When you hit severe turbulence like that, the first thing is you go up and you hit the overhead bins, and that's where the injuries, get head injuries, neck injuries, back injuries.
The plane was diverted to Bangkok, Thailand, where tents were set up on the tarmac to triage the injured according to severity. 6 passengers have critical injuries, while 23 are considered medium, including a flight attendant. Experts say it's likely the plane hit what's called clear air turbulence, which is difficult to avoid because it doesn't show up on the weather radar in the cockpit.
You can't see it, you can't forecast it. It's just where these air masses collide and causes some severe updrafts and downdrafts.
Injuries caused by turbulence are rare. According to the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States, between 2009 and 2021, 146 passengers and crew members were seriously injured because of turbulence. The general manager of the airport in Thailand says the person who died is a 73-year-old British man. He says he may have had a heart attack, but that will need to be confirmed by an autopsy.
The doctor have to investigate his body.
In a statement, Singapore Airlines offered its deepest condolences to the family of the man killed, while Boeing, the manufacturer of the airplane, says it is ready to help in any way it can. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
To Iran now, where thousands of mourners lined the streets to pay their respects to President Ebrahim Raisi and other officials killed in a helicopter crash. A procession was held in the religious city of Qom before Raisi's casket was brought to Tehran. The late president is expected to be laid to rest in the holy city of Mashhad on Friday. Raisi was seen as a potential successor to Iran's current supreme leader. His death has now raised questions about Iran's political future. Elections for a new president will be held at the end of June.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hitting back against attempts to seek warrants for his arrest over war crimes in Gaza. Yesterday, the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court announced that there was evidence that both Israeli and Hamas leaders committed crimes against humanity. CTV's Judy Trin reports on Canada's reaction to the developments.
As famine takes hold and starvation spreads in Gaza, Israel is launching diplomatic attacks on a new front against the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court.
This guy is out to demonize Israel. He's doing a hit job. He's creating a false symmetry between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the terrorist chieftains.
No foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader. No one can act with impunity. Nothing on earth can justify willfully depriving human beings.
Karim Khan is seeking warrants for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and his Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, along with 3 architects of the October 7th attacks, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Diab, and Ismail Haniyeh. The Palestinian delegation in Canada applauds the calls for arrests, but objects to a comparison of scale.
Israel has committed atrocities that amount to 40,000 people being slaughtered.
The ICC's chief prosecutor says there's evidence Netanyahu and Gallant are directing attacks at civilians and using starvation as a weapon of war. Delays continue in transporting food, fuel, and water. Humanitarian aid has to be airdropped and brought in from the sea.
We have asked and continue to ask for plenty of access. We're getting more, but it's still not enough. We need to get in at scale to be able to avert famine.
All parties must make sure that they abide by international law, including international humanitarian law. We've been calling all parties to do so for months now.
It will take about 2 months for a panel of judges to decide if warrants should be issued. If so, Benjamin Netanyahu could be arrested if he travels outside of Israel to a country where the ICC has jurisdiction. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
Now to the latest in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Lawyers rested their defense this morning without the former president taking the witness stand. This comes following testimony from a former federal prosecutor called in by the defense to attack the credibility of the prosecution's key witness, Michael Cohen. The jury has been sent home until next Tuesday, when closing arguments are expected.
Donald Trump always says he's going to do something, and he doesn't end up doing it when it involves testifying under oath. He didn't testify for the Mueller report. He didn't testify before Congress with the January 6th investigation. He didn't testify in the previous trial involving the previous civil issues involving Stormy Daniels, and he didn't testify here. There's great risk with Donald Trump testifying that he would say something that would create a perjury charge, but it would also open him to cross-examination, and that might put forward a lot of evidence that the Trump defense does not want put forward.
Attorneys returned after the jury was dismissed to discuss how the judge will instruct jurors regarding their deliberations.
Back in this country now, in a chaotic scene in Toronto last night, a group of people engaged in a fireworks battle, pointing the fireworks at one another and even at police officers who were trying to break up the melee. CTV's Rahim Ladani has that story.
You can clearly hear the crackling as fireworks are being shot, not up in the sky, but across a busy Bloor Street West. The chaotic scene taking place Monday night.
When I looked out the window, it was just like kids running up and down, like shooting each other with fireworks, shooting at people, and a lot of smoke.
This all began unfolding around 9 o'clock when people could be seen casually shooting fireworks from the sidewalk, while others took direct aim at Toronto police cruisers.
They were kind of just guarding off the park area, so they were keeping like the teenagers to one side.
Officers were on hand during the mayhem, and several bags of fireworks were confiscated.
I think it's difficult with enforcement because I feel like teenagers and young people are going to do it regardless. Like even where I grew up in the suburbs, people were always getting fireworks and doing really stupid things with them. So I feel like unfortunately, it is just something that happens.